Welcome back. In Syria, the opposition's long struggled to make political inroads into the Ba'ath Party-controlled state. Today, most of the government's dissidents are in exile abroad. But as Nicole Johnston reports, during the so-called Damascus Spring, which we were hearing about in Part 1, the opposition enjoyed some respite from Syria's political repression.
The death of former Syrian President Hafez al-Assad 7 years ago ushered in a new period of political freedom. His son, Bashar al-Assad, took over.
I swear to Almighty God to devotedly safeguard the Republic, democratic and popular system, and to respect the Constitution and laws.
Intellectuals and the opposition came out of the dark. Political prisoners were set free and civil society groups flourished. That period became known as the Damascus Spring. But it didn't last. Within a year, hardliners warned the move had gone too far. Winter was unleashed and the crackdown started. Activists and politicians ended up back behind bars, and the opposition retreated to the shadows, most of them moving abroad. It took a bomb ripping through former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri's convoy for Syria's fragmented opposition to re-emerge and attempt to unite its ranks. Secular activist Michel Kilo met with the leader of Syria's Muslim Brotherhood.
The Syrians don't want to change faces. They would rather change mindsets and policies. There's no point in replacing an 80-year-old figure with another 40-year-old figure embracing the same way of thinking.
Exiled former Vice President Abdul Halim Haddam then denounced the government. Damascus responded.
The comments made by Abdul Halim Khaddam yesterday constitute criminal offense tantamount to treason. Therefore, I demand he be referred to the State Security High Court to be put to trial together with his sons for treason and other crimes.
But the violence in Iraq is now damaging Syria's opposition. For many Syrians, the daily carnage across the border has boosted al-Assad's legitimacy, convincing them that experimenting with democracy will lead to political instability, a fear Bashar al-Assad has skillfully exploited.
Let's go to Dr. Marwan Karbalan from Damascus University to get a view about the position of the opposition. The US State Department has said there's a credible opposition force if it has some money to conduct a campaign, if it has access to the media, if there are independent electoral observers. Does any of that exist in Syria?
Well, let me first stress that democracy in the Arab world has always have its limits. And there are always red lines, not only in Syria, but everywhere in the Arab world. And I guess that was very clear in several elections that have taken place in the region over the past couple of years. And let me also say that this time in Syria, it's a little bit different because, as I said earlier, I mean, the lack of interest by the people here is a statement in itself. And if you read it, I mean, clearly, you would understand how people are viewing this whole electoral process. As for the United States and the Syrian opposition, in fact, right now is very weak, and its weakness is derived actually from two reasons. The first one is that because it's located outside the country, and this is why it can't really be effective in presenting a real program and a real alternative to the existing system. The second reason, in my opinion, the internal opposition in particular is so weak and so fragmented and is not trying to work or to play the game or work from inside the system. My understanding is that the candidates who are standing today for elections are, I mean, the main weakness of these candidates, they couldn't approach the people in the way that they could make them more credible in presenting a real change for the people inside the country, and also in presenting themselves as important figures in the coming election, and that they are going to form something like a force.
I want to ask Dr. Jabour, former Ba'ath MP, why he believes so many of those people who say they oppose his party find it necessary to live outside of Syria?
Well, I think that many of them are inside Syria. Some of them are within the electoral campaign, as our partner in this program said. I described them as less enthusiastic, and he described them as opposition. Then, of course, nobody forced them to go out of Syria. Now, if we talk about repression, those who were imprisoned are a very few minority. As a matter of fact, we have people in the opposition who have never set a foot in Syria. This is, of course, known to everybody that there is a certain opposition personality who lived all his life in Saudi Arabia and in the United States, and he considers himself to be an opposition leader in Syria, and he has never set a foot in Syria. So I think that this sort of thing leaves some sort of suspicion within the Syrian population that the movement from outside is not sort of innocent from the influences of outside on Syria. It is not foreign to the pressures exercised on Syria from the outside.
Osama Monajed from the Movement for Justice and Development in Syria. We mentioned earlier on the Damascus Declaration, which called for an end to emergency rule, and the Damascus Spring, which was a period of, if you like, political freedom that appeared to be arriving in Syria shortly after the death of the previous president. How have things moved on from that?
Well, it seems that the other honourable guests are trying to drag us down to the micro examples, which is always, can find exceptions. Let's take a look at the whole picture. Like Mr. Kabalan just said, that the main two problems with the Syrian opposition is that it is outside, and I disagree with this. It is inside, but it doesn't have the tools. It doesn't have actually any kind of constitutional rights or lawful rights to do whatsoever or express its opinion. It's like opposition. And secondly, it says in the other factor that it is the inside one is weak and fragmented. So I don't know where's the point. Anyway, it's not weak and fragmented. Things are moving forward. Damascus Spring was only the start, the ignition. Then we have the Damascus Declaration, despite what happened to all Damascus Spring figures, but the cycle of change has started. Nothing can stop this. We are, as a youth, and I belong to the generation of youth, we believe that we have the right to live in a free and democratic country. President Bashar al-Assad, for instance, swore when he got elected, and he said that he will protect democracy and promote it in Syria, and we cannot see anything happening in 7 years. So I think that to wait for a change from the side of regime, that should have, at least we could have seen some signs, but there is no such a sign. That's why Damascus Declaration, that's why Damascus Declaration announced that there is no way in changing the system from within the regime. And
now, I have to bring in
and what's going on.
I have to bring in Dr. Jabour at this point, because I'd like to end with his views on the future. Whether you'd be happy to continue with this form of parliamentary democracy, in quotes, or whether you think there will be changes. Do you feel a mood of change at all?
Well, there are all sorts of ideas of reform within the Ba'ath Party, within the parties allied to the Ba'ath, and within the general public. The circumstances of Syria allow the regime to take some of the reforms in a manner that does not jeopardize its foreign policy and its internal security. The situation in Syria is, of course, heavy with involvement in regional politics. Regional politics is imposed upon us, and we are within it also by our own will. But then look to what happens in Iraq, what happens in Lebanon, and you see that the government of Syria, while it has a reformist stand, yet within the circumstances obtaining...
I have to stop you there, Dr. Jabbour. I have to stop you. I'm sorry about that. The results, we are told, will be announced on Monday or Tuesday, but I think we can say with some certainty here that the winner in this year's Syrian parliamentary elections will be the Ba'ath Party. Thanks.